My name is Anna Pierce. I'm 38 years old. My daughter Maya is 11. She has been running since she was 4 years old. Not because anyone told her to, not because we signed her up for anything, but because she discovered at age 4 that her legs could move faster than she expected them to, and that this discovery produced a feeling she wanted to repeat as often as possible. She runs the way some children read, constantly, automatically, like it is the default state, and everything else is the interruption. She runs to school in the mornings when we have time. She runs in the backyard after dinner until the light is gone. She runs on weekends at the track 2 miles from our house, alone or with me, early enough that the mist is still sitting in the low parts of the field. She runs in the rain if I let her, which I usually do, because there is something about a child who wants to run in the rain that I don't have the heart to stop. She has never asked to be the fastest. She has asked to get faster, which is a different thing entirely. She has a notebook, a running notebook, distinct from her school notebooks, kept in her gym bag at all times, where she records every time, every distance, every condition, weather, surface, how she slept, what she ate, how her legs felt in the first half mile versus the second. She has been keeping this notebook since she was 8, when she decided that if she was going to take running seriously, she needed to treat it the way she treated everything she took seriously, with documentation and method. She has 3 of them now. They go in a specific order on her shelf. I want to tell you something about who Maya is before I tell you what happened to her, because the story doesn't make sense without it. She is the kind of child who finishes what she starts. Not because she was raised with rigid expectation. She wasn't. But because she has an internal sense of completion that I have never been able to explain or trace to anything in particular. She simply does not leave things unfinished. Books, projects, arguments with herself about how something works. She will sit with an unanswered question for days, weeks, returning to it the way you return to a loose thread until she has pulled it all the way through. She applies this quality to running, which means that when she has a bad day at the track, legs heavy, time slow, something not clicking, she doesn't decide it was a bad day and move on. She writes it down, analyzes it, identifies the variables she can address, and goes back. Every run produces data. Every data point is useful. She has never, in 3 notebooks worth of running, described a session as wasted. She gets this from her father, who is an engineer and approaches every problem the same way. She gets the running itself from nobody in particular. It arrived in her the way some things arrive in children, fully formed, deeply rooted, entirely her own. When she was 9, she joined the junior athletics club at our local sports center. It was the natural next step. She had outgrown the informal running she did alone, and she wanted coaching, wanted to learn the things she couldn't learn from books and YouTube tutorials. She came home from the first session glowing. She said the coach, a man named Mr. Carver, had watched her run and told her she had natural form. Natural form. She wrote it in the running notebook that night, circled it twice, added 3 exclamation marks, which is unusual for her. The running notebook is generally kept in a precise, unemotional style, more log than diary. But that night she circled it and added 3 exclamation marks, and I saw it later when she showed me the entry, and I thought, good, she has found a person who sees her. I was wrong about that. But I didn't know it yet. She trained with Mr. Carver's group for 2 years. The first year was good. The sessions were structured, the improvements were measurable, and she came home after each one with something new to write in the notebook. A technique adjustment, a split time, a drill that had helped. She was progressing. You could see it in the numbers, and you could see it in her body, in the way she moved, in the confidence of a child who is getting better at something she loves. Then she turned 10. At 10, Maya hit a growth phase. 4 inches in 7 months. Her legs got longer. Her center of gravity shifted. The stride that had come naturally at 9, the one Mr. Carver had called natural form, became something she had to relearn. This is completely normal. Any coach who works with growing children knows this. The body changes and the running has to change with it. It is a period of awkwardness and recalibration that can last months. And the job of a good coach during that period is to help the child understand what is happening and why, to give them the tools to find the new stride, and to be patient with the process. Mr. Carver was not patient with the process. He started commenting on her pace in front of the group, not with the framing of a coach identifying something to work on together, with the tone of someone reporting a disappointing fact. She's falling behind again today. You can see she's struggling to find her stride. Some runners go through phases, and some just don't come back from them. Some just don't come back from them, said to a 10-year-old girl in front of her training group. Maya came home after that session and said nothing. She ate dinner quietly. She did her homework. She went to bed. I asked how training was, and she said fine, which was the word she used when something was not fine, but she had not yet decided how to talk about it. I found out what had been said because another parent texted me the following day. She said she didn't want to overstep, but she thought I should know, and then she told me what her daughter had told her in the car on the way home from the session. I wrote it down. Date, time, what was said, who heard it. I opened a new folder on my phone. I called it Track. Over the following 6 weeks, I documented 7 incidents. Some I heard directly. I stayed for the full session 4 times after that, standing at the edge of the track with my phone in my hand. Some came from the other parent, whose daughter trained in the same group. Some came eventually from Maya herself, on evenings when she came home and sat at the kitchen table and started talking in the careful, measured way she has when she has been processing something for a while and has finally decided it is ready to be said out loud. The clearest incident, the one I returned to again and again in the weeks that followed, happened at the end of a time trial in October. Maya had run a personal best, not by a lot, 4 seconds, but 4 seconds at her level, at her age, in the middle of a growth phase and a stride transition, is genuinely significant. Anyone who understood what she was going through would have known that. Anyone who was watching her and not comparing her against some fixed internal standard of what progress should look like would have seen it for what it was. She came off the track looking at her watch. Her face had the expression she gets when numbers line up with effort. Quiet satisfaction, the contained private pleasure of someone whose data has confirmed what they suspected. She wasn't performing it for anyone. She wasn't looking around to see if anyone had noticed. She was just standing there, with her watch and her knowledge, complete. Mr. Carver looked at the time. He said, "It's a small improvement. But you need to be realistic, Maya. Some girls your size don't have the build for serious competition. You might want to think about that going forward." She was standing 6 feet away from me. I watched her face. I watched the quiet satisfaction leave it. Not with a flinch, not with tears, not with any outward sign that most people would have caught. Just a shift. The way a light changes when a cloud passes over the sun. Still there, but different. She wrote the time in the running notebook that evening. She wrote PB by 4 seconds. Then below that, nothing. No analysis, no variables, no next session plan. She closed the notebook and put it on the shelf and didn't take it out again for 5 days. I watched the notebook sit on the shelf for 5 days. I didn't say anything about it. I have learned, through years of paying close attention to Maya, that the way to reach her is not directly and not quickly. She processes internally, completely, and she arrives at the other side of things in her own time. Pushing before she is ready produces nothing. Waiting and being clearly present and available produces the conversation you actually need to have. On the 5th day, she came to find me in the kitchen. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she said, "Mom, I want to keep running. I just don't want to keep running for him." I looked at my daughter, 11 years old, 3 notebooks on her shelf, legs that had grown 4 inches in 7 months and were in the process of learning themselves again. "Okay," I said. "Then we find you a different coach." I want to tell you about the 2 things I did that week because they both matter. The first was a formal complaint to the athletics club. I submitted it in writing with the 7 documented incidents, the dates, the names of 2 other parents willing to corroborate. I was clear about what I was asking for: an acknowledgement that the pattern had occurred, a commitment that it would not continue, and a review of how coaching conduct was monitored in junior groups. The club conducted a review. Mr. Carver was not removed. I had expected this outcome, and I was not surprised by it. He received a formal warning, and the club committed to a monitoring process for the following season. I noted the outcome, added it to the folder, and accepted it as the result of the process I had used. The point of the complaint was not to end his career. The point was to create a record and put the club on notice. That happened. The second thing I did was find Maya a new coach. Her name was Carol. She had been a competitive middle-distance runner in her 20s, coached youth athletics for 14 years, and had in our first conversation a quality that I recognized immediately as the opposite of what Maya had been experiencing. She was interested in the specific child in front of her, not in some general category of child she was comparing that specific child against. She told me her coaching philosophy in the first meeting. The job of a youth coach is not to identify who is currently the fastest. It is to build the conditions in which each child can find out how fast they can become. Those are different jobs. Coaches who confuse them do a great deal of damage to children who have a great deal of potential but are not yet expressing it in ways the coach knows how to see. I did not tell her what Mr. Carver had said. I wanted Carol to see Maya without that context, to see her on her own terms. Maya trained with Carol for 4 months before the regional junior championship. In the second session, Carol asked to see the running notebook. Maya looked at her for a moment. The notebooks are private in a way her school notebooks are not, kept in her gym bag, not left on the kitchen table, and then she handed it over. Carol spent 20 minutes with all 3 of them. She asked Maya questions about specific entries. What did you mean when you wrote legs felt heavy in the 2nd mile? What does good feel like when you compare it to this entry? When did the new stride start feeling like yours, rather than something you were borrowing? Maya talked for 40 minutes. I had never heard her talk about running for 40 minutes. She writes about it constantly, thinks about it constantly, but the talking was new. Carol had opened something by asking questions that had real answers, questions that treated the running notebook as the serious document it was. At the end of the session, Carol told her 3 things. She told her that she had more data on her own running than most adult athletes collected in a full competitive season. She told her that the growth phase stride transition she had been going through was nearly complete, and that her new stride, when she found it consistently, would be measurably more efficient than the old one. That the awkwardness was not failure. It was the price of the improvement that was coming, and she told her that the 4-second PB in October had been significant. Not small. Significant. 4 seconds in a growth phase with a stride transition in progress was a result that a coach who understood what was happening would have celebrated. Maya was quiet for a moment. He said it was small, she said. Carol looked at her steadily. 4 seconds in a growth phase with a stride transition, she said, is not small. Anyone who told you it was small either didn't understand what they were looking at or chose not to. Maya looked at her. Then she opened the running notebook and wrote something. I couldn't see what it was from where I was sitting. I found out later. She had written, Carol says the PB was significant. She says the stride is nearly there. Below that she had written, I think she's right. The regional championship was in February. Maya had been entered in the 800 meters. Her personal best going into it was 2 minutes, 41 seconds. the October time trial that Mr. Carver had called a small improvement. The race was on a Saturday morning. The track was wet from overnight rain. The mist was sitting in the low parts of the field, the same mist I watch from a distance on the early Saturday mornings when she runs alone. She warmed up quietly. She didn't talk much in the hour before a race. She goes internal, runs through things in her head, checks in with her body the way the notebook has trained her to do. I stood with Carol, and we watched her warm up, and Carol said at one point, without looking at me, "She's ready." I can see it in how she's moving. I watched her move. I thought, yes, I can see it too. She ran 2 minutes 34 seconds, 7 seconds faster than her personal best. First place in her age category. She came off the track and walked to where Carol and I were standing. She looked at her watch. She looked at the board. She looked at Carol. Carol said, "That's what I thought." Maya said, "That's what I thought too." She opened the running notebook. She wrote the time, 2:34. She wrote, "Regional champion." Then, below that, in smaller letters, in the careful, precise handwriting she uses for everything that matters, he was wrong. Not in anger, not as a declaration, in the tone of someone who has run the experiment, collected the data, and is recording the accurate result. He was wrong. I drove home with the notebook in my lap because she had asked me to hold it during the cool down. I looked at those 3 words for most of the drive. He was wrong. I thought about 5 days with the notebook on the shelf. I thought about quiet satisfaction leaving a face. I thought about some girls your size don't have the build for serious competition, said to a 10-year-old in front of her training group, and about the specific damage that kind of a sentence does. Not the loud, obvious damage of cruelty, but the quiet damage of a seed planted in a child's mind that grows in the dark without her knowing, until one day she is standing on a track with a personal best in front of her, and she has to decide whether to believe the number, or the man who told her the number didn't matter. She believed the number. She always believed the number, I think. She just needed 4 months with someone who also believed it. The running notebook is on its 4th volume now. Carol has entered her in 2 more competitions this spring. She is training 4 days a week. She has started keeping a second column in the notebook, projected times based on her rate of improvement, calculated with the kind of methodical optimism that is entirely and completely her. Last week she went back to the October entry, the time trial, the 4-second PB. She showed me what she had added, in recent ink below the original entry. She had written, "This was significant," 3 words, same size as everything else on the page. No exclamation marks, no drama, just the record corrected. That's my daughter. She runs until the light is gone, and she writes everything down, and when the record is wrong, she goes back and fixes it, and she keeps running. If this story stayed with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Tender Heart Stories. Drop your location in the comments, USA, UK, Canada, Australia, wherever you're watching from. I read every single one. Has anyone ever told your child what they couldn't do and been completely wrong? See you in the next one.